In a lot of 80s movies, swords and sorcery seemed to be the popular theme. Movies like Excalibur, Conan the Barbarian, and Hercules set the standard at first. And then came a movie about immortals living among us, and they can only be killed by getting their heads chopped off. Highlander was released in 1986 with the biggest name in the cast being Sean Connery. We'll take a look back at this action-adventure movie on the next Back to the Feature.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
The tagline for Highlander was, "There can be only one," and it's still a quote used to this day. Not only does this movie feature songs from Queen on the soundtrack, it has Sean Connery as an immortal who becomes a mentor to our lead character Connor MacLeod, played by Christopher Lambert. At this point, Lambert was most famous for playing the lead in Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan. However, Highlander would go on to become his most famous role. It's New York City, 1985, and Connor is chilling at a wrestling match at Madison Square Garden. He's just sitting there in the stands, not watching the match. He gets up and goes to the parking garage. As he saunters through the garage, he senses he's not alone. And it's because he's not. A dude comes up behind him wearing a suit and sunglasses. And when Connor turns around, you can pretty much guess this guy's future isn't going to be too bright. The suited man is Facile, who's a French immortal. He immediately pulls out a big-ass sword and starts waving it around. Connor calmly pulls out his own sword that he had tucked away under his trench coat. And just like that, we have our first duel, folks. They start swashbuckling all over the place with no regard for any of the parked cars. At one point, Facile gets the upper hand by disarming Connor, who has to use a pipe to defend himself. Did I mention that Facile had a background in gymnastics? Okay, now Facile is just showing off. The dude could have just ran down the aisle. Connor eventually grabs his blade from under a car and it's back to the fight. This time he relieves Facile of his sword, leaving him defenseless. Without saying a word, Connor slices his head clean off, even slicing his blade into a cement pillar. Then things get weird. Facile's body starts floating up in the air and a blue electrical current starts flashing around as all the parked cars start moving. A bright light hits Connor and the wind picks up. And suddenly all the cars start blowing up as he just stands there soaking it all in. When it's all over, he gets up and takes off, but not before hiding his blade, leaving nothing but total destruction behind. I'm betting there's going to be some pissed off people when the wrestling match is over. Next up is a flashback to the Scottish Highlands in the year 1536, where Connor is leading the MacLeod clan to battle against the Fraser clan. What the MacLeod clan doesn't know is that the Frasers have a ringer on their side. His name is the Kurgan and he's played masterfully by Clancy Brown. The Kurgan agrees to help the Fraser clan in battle as long as he is the only one who gets to kill Connor. As they rush into battle, it plays out more like a Timu Game of Thrones episode. It was 1986 after all. At first, Connor just does a lot of standing around while everyone else is fighting and dying. He walks around looking for someone to fight and no one will engage with him. It's kind of comical to watch him asking people to fight him. But then the Kurgan shows up and Connor's like, finally, someone to fight. It's not really a fight at all though, because the Kurgan stabs him right off the bat, leaving him mortally wounded before he could even get a shot in. And just before he goes to chop off Connor's head, the Kurgan says, "There can be only one." Fortunately for Connor, the Kurgan is stopped before he could finish the deed. Unfortunately for Connor, he's still laying in the middle of a battlefield bleeding out. Back in the present, Connor is driving like a madman to get out of the garage. He sucks at getting away as much as he sucked at fighting in his younger days. He's caught and arrested by the police right as he pulls out of the garage. The police are investigating the decapitated body they found in the garage as Brenda, the police forensic expert, is just arriving on the scene. She finds Facile's sword and what do you know? She's an expert on antique swords. How convenient. Down at the station, Connor, aka Russell Nash, is interrogated and asked about Facile's sword. As Mr. Nash, he's an antique dealer, so he's a prime suspect. But since they have no proof, they have to let him go. The Kurgan checks into a seedy New York hotel and signs in as Victor Kurgan. Once in his room, he opens a briefcase to reveal a sword that requires some assembly. You know, like a pool cue, but a bit more advanced. Once he has it all put together, we get a montage of him doing some fancy moves with it. Connor is back at the garage recovering his sword when Brenda shows up looking for more clues. She finds the spot where Connor's blade got stuck in the pillar and digs out some small pieces of metal. She then goes to a local bar where she's followed by Connor, who tries to talk to her, but she's not very chatty with weird strangers. When Connor leaves the bar, Brenda is waiting to follow him. He senses he's being followed and ducks into an alley, and just as Brenda shows up, he's attacked by the Kurgan. It's not a fair fight as Connor doesn't have his sword with him. Brenda can only watch as the Kurgan bitch slaps Connor all over the alley, but then a police helicopter shows up and interrupts them. The Kurgan takes off one way and Connor runs off the other with Brenda in tow. She quizzes him about the Kurgan calling him Highlander and saying there could be only one. Connor just yells at her to not follow him ever again. We jump back to 1536 and Connor is completely recovered from his wound overnight. This miracle doesn't sit well with his girlfriend and his cousin who thinks he has the devil in him. The whole village is freaked out and they turn on him. They want to burn him at the stake, but the village chief decides he should be banished. He eventually settles down and leads a quiet life as a blacksmith and married to Heather. Eventually, a Spaniard named Ramirez shows up and introduces himself. The late great Sean Connery plays Ramirez, and he really elevates the whole movie. As Ramirez tells Connor he knows who he is and what happened to him, a strange lightning storm appears, causing Connor to freak out a bit. Lightning strikes him several times, and Ramirez tells him that what he's experiencing is called the Quickening. Back in New York, Connor is sitting on his couch sharpening his sword. And that's not a euphemism either. He's literally sharpening his sword while looking at a book about the history of ancient sword making that was written by none other than Brenda. What are the odds? Ramirez is training Connor on a boat and Connor admits he can't swim. Ramirez tips him overboard and Connor screams like a little girl for help. He thinks he's drowning, but Ramirez tells him he can't drown because he's immortal. That little fact doesn't stop Connor from sinking to the bottom of the lake though. Ramirez rows away, leaving Connor alone to figure his way out of his predicament. Once at the bottom of the lake, Connor is surprised to find that he can breathe underwater. So he walks along the lake floor until he gets back to shore. Ramirez explains to him what it is to be an immortal. He says eventually there will be a gathering when there are only a few immortals left and they will be drawn to seek each other out until there's only one left. He then begins to teach Connor how to fight. Remember, up to this point, we've only seen Connor in one fight and he got stabbed immediately. Then we get a training montage as Connor learns the most important thing of all. If he gets his head cut off, it's over. The only place he is truly safe is on holy ground. The final training scene on the beach reminds me of the beach scene in Rocky III. I mean, as I'm watching Highlander again, it's the first thing I thought of. You take a look and you be the judge. Connor isn't pleased to learn that immortals can't have children. He thinks Heather isn't going to be too happy about that. Ramirez tells him that he was born over 2,400 years ago and he has had 3 wives who have come and gone and left him with nothing but heartache. Tells Connor to leave Heather to spare himself the same pain. Ramirez tells Connor about the Kurgan and how he is the strongest of the immortals and that if he were to be the last one standing, he would bring nothing but evil to the world. One night soon after, Connor is away, leaving Ramirez home with Heather, and guess who shows up? Ramirez's spidey sense starts tingling and the Kurgan comes busting through the front door. They start fighting and Ramirez draws first blood by cutting the Kurgan's throat, but not deep enough to take his head off. They end up tearing up the place pretty good and Ramirez eventually stabs the Kurgan in the stomach. All that did was make him mad though, and he returns the favor by stabbing Ramirez in the back. Their final moment is pretty cool though, as they're standing on top of a stone staircase that is somehow still standing even though everything around it is collapsed. The Kurgan then makes the declaration about there being only one, and with one big swing, the head of Ramirez goes flying. Back in New York again, Brenda shows up at Connor's antique dealership where he works with his adopted daughter Rachel. Brenda's inquiring about swords, so he invites her to dinner. And while he's getting ready, Rachel encourages him to open up a bit with Brenda. He arrives for dinner at her place and quickly finds her hidden gun and tape recorder. He seems amused by it all until he spots the detective sitting outside in his car. After that, the dinner date is over and he leaves. Back in the Highlands, Connor has returned home to Heather in the aftermath of the Kurgan killing Ramirez. As Freddie Mercury sings Who Wants to Live Forever, we get a long montage of Connor living out his life with Heather as she grows old and gray. On her deathbed, he promises to light a candle each year for her birthday. We get a nice shot of him leaving his MacLeod sword marking her grave as he walks away, now carrying the special Chinese sword that Ramirez had. In a funny flashback to the late 1700s, Connor is in a duel with an aristocratic chap because he called his wife a bloated warthog. He's a bit drunk and the other guy stabs him, but Connor keeps getting back up for more. This process repeats itself several times. The Kurgan has caught up with another immortal in an alley where they clank swords. What's with hanging out in the dark alleys? Some weird civilian is out cosplaying as the Punisher and happens upon the fight just as the Kurgan cuts the dude's head off. Timu Punisher guns down the Kurgan but then can't find his body. His bravery is then rewarded by a little pokey poke to the belly. His screams bring more witnesses as we watch the Kurgan absorb the other immortal's energy through the Quickening. As the Quickening comes to a big finish, all the windows explode in the surrounding buildings, and then the Kurgan steals a car to escape. Brenda does some digging and finds out that not only is Connor's Nash identity fake, but he's been around at least since the 1700s using other fake identities. Connor is at a local church lighting a candle for Heather's birthday when the Kurgan shows up for a little chat. He tells Connor that they are the last two immortals left, and to prove that he's an a-hole, he even harasses a couple of nuns walking by. He then brags about how he killed Ramirez and raped his woman. The look on Connor's face tells the Kurgan that the woman actually belonged to Connor. Connor is pissed but knows they can't fight on holy ground, so he tells him he'll be waiting out front. Brenda confronts Connor at his antique dealership and he tells her the truth about his life. He tells her how he's been alive for 450 years and he cannot die. He then hands her a knife and makes him stab him in the gut to prove his immortality. Nothing like a little stab wound to make you want to jump in the sack. People are so weird. The next day they're hanging out at the zoo holding hands, not realizing that the Kurgan was following them. When Brenda gets home that night, the Kurgan is waiting for her in the hall. He kidnaps her and then leaves a voicemail for Connor to come fight him. Connor grabs his sword and says a sweet final goodbye to Rachel and heads out to face off with the Kurgan. He finds Brenda tied up to a rooftop neon sign, but it's a trap. Before he can untie her, the Kurgan jumps down and the fight is on. The Kurgan ends up destroying most of the rooftop in his effort to kill Connor. They battle it out until they fall through the floor to the warehouse below. With the blue windows behind them, this really reminded me of the lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader. Connor finally makes his big move and slices the Kurgan's head off, and in a big flash of light and wind, Connor becomes the last immortal as he sucks in all the energy. It takes a good minute or so for all of this to work itself out, but finally it's over. When he looks up, Brenda is there. In the epilogue, Connor takes Brenda back to the Highlands where it all began. Turns out that the gathering gave him the ability to hear what everyone is thinking all over the world. So he's kind of a god. He plans on using it to help the world be peaceful. On the flip side, there was something Ramirez didn't tell Connor about winning the gathering. He's now mortal and can have children, so he's free to live out his life with Brenda if she'll have him. They have a picnic in the hills and then fade to black. The end. Highlander didn't do great at the box office, but it would eventually find an audience on video. I saw it in the theater when it came out and I remember liking it but thinking it could have been a lot better. It would go on to have a couple sequels, Highlander 2 The Quickening and Highlander 3 The Sorcerer. Both were subpar to say the least. It looks like a planned reboot is finally happening with Henry Cavill taking on the role of Connor with a release date in 2026. We've seen how good Henry is with the sword in The Witcher, so I have high hopes for this new Highlander. What did you think of Highlander? How do you think it compares to some of the other swashbuckling movies of the 1980s? Let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below to help grow this channel. I appreciate you taking time out of your day and hope you will come back for the next Back to the Feature.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.